Good morning, everybody. This is Phil. I'm doing a quick video about authoring and my two books in general. I have lots of experience with authoring in the field. Uh, some would argue, no, you don't. You weren't published by a real publisher that paid you. And I had some arguments on Facebook and some writers groups where there's always a tendency of the very immature author or two jumping up on a new guy thinking that they're going to run them off so they get all the publicity there and they're the ones that promote their work more, uh, if not for each specific art, okay, or each specific work and book, then their name being out there gets a lot of attention, okay, and its own publicity based on their name. Below the Precipice was written between 2005 and 2007. It was published in the 2007 year, and it is my mega biblion. It's quite a few hundred pages. However, it was written on an older computer, and it should be about 500 or 700 pages long. Okay, and the font is much smaller. When I sent the information to Author House to publish this paperback, and because this was such a larger biblion or mega biblion of mine, my breakout novel, I did the short story Taken for Granite, which is basically 130 pages, something like that. And just to prove that this was no fluke, okay, this was on purpose. It was narrated by a single individual, and it had lots of influences, to be honest, okay? I was raised reading Ken Kesey in creative writing in college. I love the movie. The movie was kind of slow, okay, but it was well put together. You understand how people can manipulate people and be evil for their own, let's say, their own sake of employment, like Nurse Ratched. Okay. But anyways, this story takes place in a very popular neighborhood, and it's fictitious, but it had some historical influence based on the location where I was raised, where our community of 1,000+ houses was once a plantation owned by the Fitzhughs in Ravensworth Farms, Virginia. And make no doubt, we were the poorest family, dysfunctional family of this community. But that influence of ghost stories was always there with many other siblings. And my sister said, "You like writing so much, Phil, why don't you just go ahead and write a horror story like when we were kids?" Because we had a very eclectic childhood. From a dysfunctional family, yeah, but 5 other siblings, very enjoyable, very fun, very sad at times. I buried some classmates that committed suicide throughout my childhood, and we were in a very hustling and bustling community that was growing, and I think a lot of kids couldn't deal with the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, perfecting their grades, pleasing their parents, being all metropolitan, in whatever sports they chose to. And a lot of that came to mind when I wrote Below the Precipice, because Below the Precipice is about one child, the youngest of 5, and how he encounters ghosts. And because of an unfortunate accident he had when he was a child, he cracked his noggin pretty good. And he was in and out of some mental wards. Back in the late 1970s, they still had mental wards. They called them mental wards or asylums and whatnot. So I had a lot of influence from that alone, on top of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I forget the name of the one novel by that one individual that was on Oprah. I forget the name of the author, but A Million Shattered Pieces, I believe, was the name of the book. someone can correct me. That's fine. I remember the gist of the book was him going in and out of rehabs and dealing with a bunch of crazy people. And the way he described it was very enlightening, very entertaining. I'm sure there was some sadness in there. I read excerpts of the book, but I didn't read the whole book. Well, throughout the early 2000s, I was thinking to myself that I could also author something equal to or better than Ken Kesey if I did not read that book also, A Million Shattered Pieces, or whatever the name is. And the influence I had was growing up. Yes, I did some family therapy with a dysfunctional family we had, some multiple suicides in our community, such as that, where there was trauma involved. Okay, not that I spurred it, but I had a good idea of some of the psychological field already. So I drew from some life experiences since then, some dealing with post-traumatic stress as an adult. More recently, in the last 20 years, I drew from some experiences that way, and I knew I could write just as good as Ken Kesey or that one individual author. So I'll get to that in a second, because I knew how bad the publishing scene was when I opened up an account with Author House and I wanted to publish this, Below the Precipice. And the editor they suggested a private editor and gave me her number, and I spoke to the lady, and she said, I have not read anything that good in years. I said, thank you. Thank you very much. She said, I'm not blowing smoke. Okay. I would edit you, any company you go to or any company that paid you, I would edit for you, because that's how good you are. Okay. And I took that to mean something, and I was very proud of this. The story basically goes, the kid moves to a new neighborhood with his big dysfunctional family, drunk dad, an aloof mom who just pretends everything is okay. And he starts hanging out with the neighborhood kids. They go to a local lake and local fishing area, and he has an accident where it cracks his head open. And it just turns out that area, before it was a lake, it was a creek. But before it became a lake, was occupied by settlers and people that owned a large plantation. They were not all bad people, don't get me wrong, but there was a Civil War skirmish where Southerners, Confederate, basically were on the property of this one landowner who didn't want to get involved, and he slaughtered the actual Confederate troop. Well, where their bodies and parts were dismembered and discarded was where the protagonist, the main character, basically hit his head, and then he sees these same ghosts because he's in the same proximity. He has these special powers now, which I believe we all do, by the way, when we dream and we learn to interpret what those feelings of the dreams mean. And I do mean not just the dream itself, I mean the feelings, because it's usually the feeling something is wrong that will tip you off to what you need to correct, not just what you saw in the dream. In any event, this story was about him in a blockbuster novel in a format only he could speak of. And he eventually, expressing these about the ghosts he's interacting with, wants to write also so he can do something with his life because he's partially disabled, debilitated, okay, from that one crack on his head where he had permanent brain damage. You know, he can still walk around, but he gets tired quickly. He gets tired quickly, especially when he sees ghosts, okay, where he starts to get ill. But as he's getting older and raising a family on his own, he wants to author, and no one wants to help him, okay? Some of that has some influence in doing this book to begin with, okay, when I wrote this book. Because no one will tell you how to publish. Author House wants you to publish. They want you to sign on a package, but they don't tell you all the legwork you have to do to publish your book and advertise your book. So a regular package to publish this is, you know, the editing services. Well, they didn't do much editing. Every time I found a mistake, I had to go back to the drawing board, and $2 per mistake that they made, plus $200 resubmission fee. That's how they get you. I won the Better Business Bureau complaint with these guys because I was sitting there after 3 months of both books being done, one after another. I had nothing to show for it. And I said, okay, where is all this money coming? And this is on your site. Are you? No, our package just says we publish you on our site. You have to pay an additional $1,000 for us to contact 1,000 outlets. It was like 300 outlets. Okay, talk shows, radio talk shows. To do a commercial, a brief commercial would have been an extra $2,000, like an audio radio commercial for you, so on and so forth. So you put your foot in the door with these, you think you're going to get some money, and then you find out, oh, okay, all those dollar signs going off in your head were a joke. So I won the Better Business Bureau complaint 2008, 2009, and they gave me 300. The people at the Better Business Bureau basically asked me, what do you want to settle this? Because we agree with you. And I said, okay, how about the 300 outlets they talk about that I had to pay, that I wanted, but they say I have to pay for? And I said, okay. So Author House gave me the 300 outlets. It was up to me to contact every one of those individuals. Author House gave me no assistance whatsoever. Out of those 300 individuals, I had 3 people contact me back. I did one interview. One interview. When I bought these books and gave them away to newspapers for the entertainment sections and whatnot, the metro sections and whatnot, not just the Washington Post, but down south, as far as Greenville County, North Carolina, but all over the place, I gave copies away. Can you do an interview with me? Can you do an article for me? Can you help me out? You know, they'd read this book and they'd say, didn't like it. Couldn't read any more of it. Didn't like it. This one I liked. This is regular form, and this one is the Mega Biblion, and goes all over the place on purpose, narrated from a somewhat spastic individual who is, again, disabled somewhat. And he's talking about ghosts haunting him. He's talking about authoring eventually at the end of the subject matter about authoring. And, well, you know, him and his family are just going to have to survive because his family is all that's important to him. And his family knows what's going on. His family knows he has clairvoyance. His family knows he's very powerful as a young adult now. But they support him, even if the establishment does not support him. And the newspaper people did not want to entertain that kind of pushback, so to speak. And I was like, you know, this came from me. This is not me being mad at you, Mr. Editor, in any newspaper. So anyways, I had to promote this mostly on my own, and I got little to no help. So 14 years later, I'm like, you know, I'm writing ghost stories all over the place. I have about 30 plus novellas, not counting my poetry. I could throw together and be a 600, 700 page, same amount of word as this, Mega Biblion and bestseller. And I ordered these in the mail, and I just wanted to talk about them today. Excuse me, because of the history of this. When I tried to promote this, I contacted Oprah or Harpo Studios. I actually spoke to one of the very popular brown women that are her best friends in the studio. Got her on the line, and I was asking about the Harpo library. I'm like, how come you can't, take a copy and actually interview me? And I can do a story on how hard it is to publish. You know, I've spoken to the big publishers. They get about 10,000 books a week. So me sending them a copy of the book is not going to help if they don't want to read it. They have a whole stack of books. But I believe with my authoring and my skills, I believe I can bring horror movies also with good screenplays, not just cheap movies, something a little better than What Lies Beneath. I love that ghost story as a movie. but I want to do something better than that all of America can enjoy, and kind of say, wow, that was pretty deep. That was pretty deep. This eclectically, this goes all over the board. I don't mean it like that, all over the board in a bad way. This goes throughout history, and how Teal, the main character, Robert Teal McAvoy, is experiencing things and seeing things of how things once were in the same location he is currently being raised in this big community. You know, there was the historical settlers. There was the Fitzhughs, so to speak, or the people that owned this large fictitious plantation. You know, they cleared some land, set up a log cabin. You know, then they built an estate there because they were expecting children. They ran a farm and made money hand over fist. The dirt trail becomes a dirt road. You know, the dirt road eventually becomes paved. Some of the acreage is sold off to other families. So other families start building their houses on there. Now you have neighbors minutes away instead of hours away, you know, showing that the roads start to get paved because government is taking seat in the county, you know. Instead of horses and carriage, they go to the engine-ran carriages and then cars. Showing that kind of historical context is all in here. And then this one family, whose family is basically dying off because they're not farming as much anymore. This one young man wants to go in and fight in World War II. Well, the father can't have that, okay, based on the history of his family basically protecting the farm. It goes back, well, basically the father ends up fighting with the son, and the son never makes it to boot camp. He never makes it back to the war when he visited one time, okay, in this whole parkland. And then the main character sees even more going back before that, what happened during the Civil War. The predecessors of the property owners basically didn't want to get involved with the Confederate or the Northern forces. And when the Confederate troop came on their property and was bedding down at the end of their lot, the family or the father went out there and basically killed that Civil War troop. Okay, discarded their limbs and carnage over the side of this one bluff, this one rock face that they call Dead Man's Cliff. All the kids around the modern day neighborhood call Dead Man's Cliff. And so this child sees this, and he's trying to interpret what happened historically, what wrongs need to be righted historically. And a lot of editors and newspapers going through this, and the descriptions and the mental ward he went through, and the different take, my different take on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and just how he saw it, because I have my own input also, okay, of how this character would have seen it in a more modern time. You know, he was a younger kid and bumping in and out of, you know, mental institutions because he cracked his knot one time, you know, and no one believes the visions he has. And he's telling everybody, there's something not right here. This area is possessed. This area is haunted. Okay? This area has stuff that needs to be corrected. And maybe the audience would understand what I'm saying. Maybe they felt that before when they go to an older historical city and they love the vacation they have, but they feel eerie in certain areas of that older historical city. That's what I wanted to bring out in here. And I believe I did a great job. I believe this is almost as good, equal to, or better to a Ken Kesey novel. Okay? I did not read all of A Million Shattered Pieces, if that's the name of that book. Please forgive me. But I knew I could do a better one than that. Having to deal with drugs, rehab, and everything I've studied as a police officer came into this. Okay? My experience dealing with a bunch of drug-addicted people and alcoholics. So, you know, the lady I spoke to said, "Oh, we don't do that. You're soliciting. You need an agent to contact our agent." I said, "You got a library, a book I will send to you for free. Can you have someone look at it? Can I speak to someone at the library?" He said, "No, the library is kind of fictitious. It's a list of books Oprah was promoting at the time, but you had to be named. You had to make, you know." So anyways, A Million Shattered Pieces, the author there was brought back on Oprah 2 months after she publicized how great his book was and made him look like a fool, saying he plagiarized his own work, he falsified his own work, and the book was not an autobiography. The book was basically it was fiction, but it was basically some of his life's experiences, or this one character in and out of a lot of rehabs, and the crazy people he dealt with, and the way he described it was the art. Okay? She made him look like a fool in front of 290 million people, saying that he plagiarized his own work or he falsified his own work. I was like, that's not the kind of business I want to do with Oprah. You know, hey, write her off. She ain't for me. All right. Well, thank you so much. That showed me how before Oprah became a globalist, I knew ahead of time how bad she was. Okay. Setting up that one guy, especially because he's white. She wouldn't have done that if it was a black guy. But anyways, this is graphic also. This is one of the best descriptive books I've read since probably Ken Kesey and some King and some Dean Koontz. Yep, I want to make this a screenplay and see if anybody's out there will help me with my other 30 novellas of ghost stories, because this deserves it. P. Francis McNichol writing this deserves this. That's how good this book is. And everybody, even those newspaper editors, they said they love this. But because they didn't want to include this, they would not do a story together. So what is this about? Well, this is basically about Patrick Johnson. And he's a traveling vagabond, and he's escaping his past. And he basically gets a job at the local cemetery, or a cemetery in the county. And in the cemetery family that has a contract with the county basically buries dead prisoners, but they have a contract to bury people for free if they don't have the means. Okay, anybody that dies in the county. You know, someone died of natural causes, but they had no known family. That kind of thing. Well, the main character begins to realize how corrupt the dad of the family is. And he also has a tryst with his wife. Very interesting. Very interesting. And then all the corruption comes out about the father of that family. And he was dying anyways because of cancer, but he would just do as much as possible wrong to get more money from the county because he wanted to leave a legacy for his wife and children. Well, the main character stumbles into that and exposes his corruption. And it also has to do with corruption at the county level, the sheriff. And at the end, the main character, the main antagonist dies. And it turns out that they were cremating the owner of the cemetery was cremating the prisoners whenever the corrupt prison guards or sheriff killed the prisoners at whim. So, the main character, Patrick Johnson, he exposed that. And then the tryst with the wife and the children, he inherits also because they love him, they care about him. He's a pretty honest guy. He had some bad things happen to him in his past that is also exposed that he was running away from originally. And it was just very fun to write. I wrote this in a week and a half. I edited it in another week and a half. I sent it over to the editor lady. She said, "Man, good job again. Good job again, Phil." Under my pseudonym, Jonathan Allen. I just picked it out. I always loved George Allen, and I love the name Jonathan, always. I've always loved that name. I like my own name, don't get me wrong. But I've always loved George Allen, in particular of the Washington Redskins fame. And so I made up the name Jonathan Allen, and I figured, oh, okay, I want to make these a screenplay one time. Is there anybody out there that can do movies? Okay, drop a line, let me know. I'll work with you if you are the director and know what you're doing, and make a blockbuster movie that rivals The Changeling, okay, with George C. Scott, that rivals What Lies Beneath with Harrison Ford, that rivals the other 1972 production, I believe, the twin brothers. One of them died earlier. You don't know what happened exactly, but the surviving brother talks to his dead brother all the time. That's the impression I got at the time. But a real blockbuster ghost novel, well done, not a cheesy thrown together, Tubi movie. Okay. Anyways, interesting stuff about these two books. I'll probably start reading some excerpts about them and hope people enjoy. Okay. I am looking for The Disappeared, my compilation, to be published and bought from a real publisher so I can do screenplays and author books exclusively. People say all the time, Phil, how come you don't author? I do, but I don't have time to do the legwork and be shot down 20 times in a row when I send out my work to 20 different big publishers. They do not want new talent in the field to take their money. They want to promote who they want. That's a sure deal. They don't want to expand upon other new deals that they actually have to do a little bit of work for. I'm proud of these. The female editor edited encyclopedias for a living. And she said this right here was the best book she ever read because of the visualization and the dreamscapes the main character has in and out of a lot of different locations, whether it's dreams, psych wards, parklands, historical accounts, everything. But you might like this one also. I hope you enjoy both. Thank you guys. Have a great day.